What's up? Welcome to Backend Stuff. I'm Jacob Litzo. Today we are going to learn how to test our accounts context file. This file has our CRUD actions like create, read, update, and delete. We're going to pay special attention to testing our create function. In testing, we often use something called factories. Factories help us make consistent data over and over again, which is really helpful when setting things up. When we're working with database tables, we always want two kinds of data, valid or invalid. As our apps grow bigger, it's helpful to have one main source of setup data. This keeps our testing process easier to handle. If we need to make a change to a schema definition, we usually only have to update this one spot, except for the tests for the schema itself. Instead of building a factory from scratch, like we started doing with our helper functions for creating valid and invalid parameters for our schema tests, we're going to use a library called ExMachina. ExMachina makes it easy to create test data and associations, and it works really well with Ecto. So let's go ahead and open up our project Real Deal API. If you haven't been following along on this project, you can find the GitHub repo in the description below. And let's first add ExMachina to our dependencies in our mix.exs file. And we'll just put it right underneath faker. And that's going to be x_machina, comma, tilde, greater than. And then we're going to use 2.7.0. And then we also want this to only be compiled in our test environment like faker. So we're going to do only, and that's for test. And then let's go ahead and open up our terminal and get this installed. So cd mine is in documents, development, BS, Real Deal API, and then we can do mix space deps.git, and there we go, it is installed. All right, now in our test folder, we have our support file where we have our schema case, which is a case template. Let's create a factory file, or we'll create a new file, and it will be our factory. So if we right click new file, and we're going to just call it factory. We're going to put all of our data in one file right now. If this was a really large project, you could break your factories down to each schema if you wanted to, but there's really not a need for it in our small project. So let's create factory.ex. And then we'll just do def module real deal api.support.factory. And what we want to do is we want to use the ExMachina library for Ecto. So we're going to say use ExMachina.ecto. And then we need to give the path to our repo, which is real deal API, and that is just .repo. Our module is using exmachina.ecto and our application's repo. If we had more than one database in our project, we would need to have multiple factories. So let's create our first factory function following the exmachina convention. The name is, so it's the name of the schema followed by _factory. So we're going to test our accounts context file today. So it would be, it'll be account_factory. And there we go. Inside of this, we're just returning a struct. So our account struct. Let's do the %sign and then account. We got an alias in our account. So let's do alias real deal API.accounts.account. Struct. All right. And then we're just returning, and our account is just an email and hash password. So we can do email : and then let's use faker here again to create a fake email address. So faker.internet.email, and that will generate random email addresses for us, but it will also make it through our validation on our change set. And then our hash password, we're going to just use faker.internet.slug, and you could just use random words or phrases here. Slug generates 2 to 5 random words and separates the words with a dash or an underscore. So I just feel like it kind of matches like what someone's random password might be. That's pretty straightforward. We're just returning our schema struct with pre-populated values. So let's save that. And now let's create a new case template. And we're going to keep that in our support file as well. And we're going to call this data_case.ex. And then we'll make our def module, and this will be real deal API.support.datacase. And we're going to set this up a lot like our schema case. So at the top, we're going to use xunit.caseTemplate. And then we're going to do a using do, and then quote do, and then we are going to alias in Ecto change set. And then import our template right here, which is data case. So real deal API dot support dot datacase. And then we want to alias our factory and our repo. So real deal API dot, and then we can include 2 different files here since they both have the same real deal API path. So we can just do support dot factory and then do a comma, and then we want our repo as well. And what this allows, if you remember, when we use this case template, all these things are automatically imported with our file. All right, and then underneath that, we're going to do our setup, and we're not passing in any parameters for this. And all we have to do is do our Ecto adapters.sql.sandbox.mode. And our mode is, well, we have to point at our repo file, so it knows where our database is. So real deal API.repo, comma, and we're going to set this to manual. So right now, using this file brings us 2 advantages over just using the xunit.case. It provides a common sandbox setup like our schema case did in the prior videos, and it adds in an alias for our factory and repo, and we need both of those for query tests. So as we build out a test suite, it's important to keep looking for helper functions that can be moved into common files for reusability. If a function is focused on making data, it should probably go in a factory. If not, it might belong in a case template. And if the same function is needed in multiple case templates, you may want to just create a module with helper functions that can be shared across multiple case templates. So let's create our accounts context test file now. And we're going to do that just right here, not in the schema directory, but in our real deal API. And we're just going to call it accounts plural underscore test.exs. And then let's go ahead and just create the module. So def module, all right, accounts test, perfect. And then we want to use our case template we just created. So use real deal API dot data case. Oh, we need support dot data case. There we go. So save that. And then underneath that, we want to alias in our accounts context file because we're going to be using that to insert, read, update, and delete things from our database. So let's alias real deal API dot, and then we're going to do our accounts context file. And then we're also going to want our account schema, and that's at accounts.account. There we go. And then we also want to set up our database connection. So we're going to do that in a setup function. So do, and then we're going to do Ecto adapters.sql.sandbox.checkout. And then we need to send in our repo, which is real deal API.repo. All right, and since our case template data case is setting the Ecto sandbox to manual, we'll need to check out our connection for each test. So after each test, the connection will be released and all the interactions we had with our database will be rolled back. So in our case, we're starting with an empty database, and during our tests, we're going to be inserting data into tables. And when that test is complete, it'll wipe it back out to original, and then the next test will start. So we'll always be starting with the same clean slate. So let's go ahead and create our first describe block. And I want to just show you what we're going to be testing. Let's go into our Real Deal API and then our accounts context file. And here you'll see that we have, so when I say read, when we're talking about CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete, that's what get is in our case, all right? So when we're creating an account, this is the function we're going to be testing. And so let's go ahead and make our describe block for this. And it's just going to be describe, and then we're going to say create underscore account /1 because it's an arity of one function. And then inside of this, we're going to write our first test. And essentially all this test is going to do is insert an account into the database. And then we're going to just make sure that our created account struct equals the same data that was placed in the database. So we're making sure that through the change set validation, what we expect to be in the database is in fact in the database. So let's do a test here, and then we're going to call this test success : it inserts an account in the database and returns the account. Okay, so just nice, descriptive, and simple. We understand what it's doing. And now we need valid parameters. So let's do params equals, and now this is where our factory comes in handy with our little account struct that we put in there. So we can just do factory dot, and we don't want to insert an object directly into the database, but we want the struct back. So if we say string underscore params for, and then opening parentheses, and we pass in the Atom account, this is automatically going to find our account underscore factory function, because that's just how ExMachina works, okay? Or ExMachina works. We're going to get back parameters with string key values, okay? And then what we can do with this is now we want to test that our accounts.create account. First, we want to make sure it creates an account. So with that, we want to say assert, and we're expecting an OK Atom back. And then after that, we're expecting our account struct. All right, and then we'll just call this our returned account. And now to create our account, we just had to call our accounts context file and then say create account, and we can pass in the parameters that our factory just created. What we want to do here is now we have a returned account from after, creating, and we should have an account inserted into our database table. So now we want to get that account from the database. So we're going to do account underscore from underscore database. And we can just call repo.get and then our account schema. And then we want to just put in our account ID. So we can grab our returned account, which is right here from creating, and we can just call the ID from it. So now we have returned account, and then we have account straight from the database. And so now we can do another assertion test here, and we can say assert. We want to know that the returned account is in fact equal to the account from the database. All right, pretty straightforward so far, right? You've seen a lot of this stuff before. The only difference is we're using ExMachina for helping us create our data. But we have inserted things into the database before, and so we're kind of just continuing that. And so the next step you're going to notice is familiar. We want to loop through each parameter field and make sure it matches the same field from the database. But if you remember with account, we take a readable password, right? And then it gets hashed. So we can't validate, or we can't check that the hash password equals the password that we created the account with because it's been hashed. So we have to treat our hash password differently. So mutated, we're going to just go ahead and pull out our hash password value so we can test it separately in a second. So we're going to do a for loop here, and we need our parameter field, and then we need our expected value to go in there. And so we're going to just be cycling through our params that we created right here on line 11. So we're looping through params, and as long as our param field is not in our mutated list that we just created above, then we're going to test the schema field for the value from the expected and the actual. And in our case, we're only going to be testing the email field during this. But if we ever expanded what's in our account schema, this test would still work. So you want to think about that as you write tests. If you change the schema, you shouldn't have to change much in your test if you write it properly. Let's go ahead and get our schema field, and we can use string to existing atom. And our parameter field, if you remember, is just a string. So we're just turning that into an atom right now. And then we want to get our actual value from our account from database. So we're going to just use a map get here, and then we're going to grab account from database, and then we're going to just say we want the value from the current schema field we're on. So this schema field is an atom. In our case, it'll only loop through once, and it'll be :email. So we're going to have the actual value right here, and then we can do an assert test, and we want to just make sure that our actual value equals our expected value. And our expected value is coming straight out of the parameters that we generated before inserting it into the database. So as long as this is true, this test will pass. So if it's wrong, we'll have a little error message for us so we know what's going on. So values did not match for field : and then we want to know the parameter field that it failed on. So param field, and then we'll do a new line. And the expected value, we'll just do an inspect and then pass in our expected value. If I can type, expected, and then close off that curly brace, and we'll do another line and then say, but the actual value. So we'll be able to tell that our expected value didn't equal the actual value, and we'll know where to debug our code. So we'll get a nice error message if it's wrong, but it shouldn't be because we're writing awesome tests. All right, so now since we only have 2 fields in our account schema, and we've only tested the email with this for loop, we also have to test our password, and we've done this in the past. So all we're going to do is we're going to do another assert here. And then we have to call bcrypt, and we have to do a verify password. And so we have to take our params map from above where our factory created it, and we have to grab the hash password value out of there. And then we want to just validate it against the returned account hash password, which would be the hashed version of this. So we're going to just say returned account dot hash _ password. And then just like before, I'm going to do a little return. We want to have an error message so we know that they don't match if something fails here. So password, and then we want to just inspect our params. So we want to inspect our hash password from our params, and then it'll just be does not match. And we can do a new line, hash, and then we can say inspect the returned account dot hash underscore password. All right, so we'll know if they don't match. And then just one more assert test here. We can do assert. We want to make sure our account from DB dot inserted at equals account from DB updated at. So these values should be the same because we have not updated the account that was inserted. So there's our first test. Let's go ahead and run this and make sure everything passes. So let's pull up our terminal. And now if we do mix test, we need our database running. Let's open up our Docker and go ahead and press play there. And now our database is running. And let's do mix test again. Okay, variable actual is unused. Variable param does not exist. Okay, it looks like we have some typos. So let's see. It's params and actual. Oh, we have to do double equals. Okay, let's save that. I think that is all we had to do. And there we go. We have another passing test. So that's really cool. And now we can't just write one success test. We have to now have a failing test, which would happen if an account can't be created. So in the same describe block, we want to do another test, but this time we're expecting an error back. And so it will returns an error tuple when account can't be created. And this is going to be really easy. So we're going to just make some parameters called missing params. And it's just going to be an empty map. And we all know that our change set isn't going to let us create an account with an empty map. So we're just going to check against our accounts.create. We want to make sure we get a change set, so an invalid change set with an error. So all we have to do is do assert, and then we're looking for an error in this tuple, and then inside our change set struct, we're just making sure that valid is false. So that's pretty simple. And then all we have to do is set that equal to our accounts.create account, and then let's pass in missing parameters. So this test can be so simple because we've already tested all the error cases in our schema tests. So all we want to do is make sure there is an error and that the returned value is shaped correctly. So let's go ahead and now we'll just go back to our terminal and run these tests one more time. And there we go, 11 passing tests. All right, so for your challenge, I'd like you to create a test for our users.ex context file for the create function using what you learned here today. In summary, we've learned how to insert valid data to the database table and confirm that the data written to the table is indeed what we expected it to be. As always, if you need help or want to check out the solutions, check out that GitHub link in the description. And if you have more questions or just want to hang out and chat, join my Discord server, Backend Stuff. That link is in the description as well. If you want to learn how to build scalable, production-ready APIs, hit that subscribe button now. See you next time.